And now, broadcasting from Titletown, USA, here's Joe Simon.
How many times have we said it that life insurance isn't an investment and an investment is not life insurance, but you can't live without either of them. And today I come to you with a lesson, but kind of a hard lesson to explain with and about a case of an individual that many people, especially NASCAR fans, will recognize. The recent death of NASCAR champion Kyle Busch. And in the first quarter of 2026, the case that was filed in court in October of 2025 came to fruition and was settled out of court, a multi-million-dollar settlement out of court. The Busch family and a major life insurance company came to terms after, I believe it was as much as 8 to 10 years that they had this policy. It was 7 years. My notes are showing here 7-year-old indexed universal life insurance policy. A quick explanation of that for people that just don't get life insurance, and this might even fuel the fire of the anger or the mistrust that you have with life insurance. Today's show isn't about bashing either side, but it's to point out how we can learn from this and gain some valuable knowledge as we step forward from this real case that was settled in the early part of 2026. Kyle Busch, of course, passing away in mid-May of 2026 now, and had recently said that he knew life was fragile and never really knew how long he would continue to do what he was doing on the racetrack. And our condolences go out to his family. But let's talk about the product, the life insurance product, the unilateral policy contract, and no other type of contract like this in the world, where once the policy is in place, they're bound, the carrier is bound to living up to their contract, multi-millions of dollars in many cases. And the policy owner has the opportunity at any time to pull the plug, adjust it, or just terminate it, and they walk away. So what we want to point out here is this is a lawsuit that was filed in October of 2025, and it was this Index Universal Life product, which is a permanent type of life insurance policy. There are many that we could talk about. We're going to drill down on just that one today. How those typically work is there is a mirror of indexes that you can choose from with your premium and the excess amount of premium going in. Illustrations can be run using various types of projected interest rates. We've learned from years ago that hypo or hyper types of illustrations using not customary types of rates of returns just don't and is not acceptable in the industry any longer. Typically what we see is that illustrated illustration, the projection on the illustration accumulating over years could be anywhere between 6 to possibly 8 or 9%. Again, a projected illustration. But we also find in these policies there are guarantees, guaranteed rates, typically anywhere between 2 and 4%. So the first thing we want to point out in that situation is when we get excited about seeing some great numbers on any types of illustrations of this kind, we always want to revert back to what the guarantees are. If this, then that's, is what I like to point out. If the market crashes, if we had to slow down on the amount of premium we're putting in for a period of time as a policy holder, policy owner, What then happens? Let's look at the worst case numbers scenarios. And in this case, I don't know exactly what happened, but we can tell you by the court records that are public that there was a $10.4 million premium that was showing favorable projections written and illustrated longer than 7 years ago. The policy itself is 7 years old, as we mentioned. And the illustrations were showing long-term projections and long-term growth. One of the phrases that was used that points out in this court case is that the phrase was tax-free retirement plans, a tax-free retirement plan. There's a lot of thoughts behind that. Again, not going to go too deep into it, but the caution that we opened up the show today with is what? Life insurance is not an investment, and an investment is not life insurance. They dwell together well in many cases, but they're not the same. They're related, but they really aren't the same. And that was really the tip to the iceberg in this case. The Bushes looked at where they were at with that $10.4 million initial premium that went in 7 years ago, and they were claiming $8.5 million in losses, which probably precipitated the reason they were wanting to drastically terminate the relationship to the point where they were suing the life insurance carrier that owned that policy, that was underwriting that policy, didn't own it. They were the carriers on the policy that the Bushes owned on Kyle. They even pointed out, the carrier, that the Bushes acknowledged key documents pointing out what they were getting into. And so this is some of the cards, the conversation, the pieces to the puzzle on the table as they went about discussing and really bringing this to the forefront and filing a lawsuit against the insurance carrier. We know it was a 7-year-old policy. Here's the key that led to this eventually being settled out of court. At some point along the way, the Bushes decided to stop making the payments that the illustration, the agreement, the understanding of this was all about. And from an experience perspective, I can tell you that if you set out perhaps this $10.7 or $10.4 million of premium that was in there was based on a one-time contribution or a several years of possibly the same amount over several years. I can tell you that just starting out, we know that there was $10.4 million of premium that was in there. So that would tell me a very large life insurance policy, and I'll call that the shell, to hold all of this premium fluid being poured in. We know that you can't get a life insurance policy for $10.4 million. Why would you do that in the first place? So in many cases, that policy, the shell, the actual death benefit, could be as much as 100 times that $10.4 million premium put in. So this was a multi-million-dollar life insurance policy to hold multi-millions of dollars in premium that were projected and planned on being poured in to this container called the life insurance policy. Now, why would someone do that? Why would someone put that much money into a life insurance policy? Wouldn't they be better off going out and buying something else, some type of investment, something else other than this life insurance policy? And that's a logical question to have, and why many people do it this way is because they also have investments like that, and they also realize the tax ramifications and the legalities tied up in something like that. Someone like Mr. Bush probably had a well-diversified portfolio of other things going on. I don't know. I can speculate on this. But we come back to what we do know, and it's a large life insurance policy to hold a large premium being poured in. So one of the benefits to that is the death benefit, if it was purely owned by Kyle Busch, or possibly a irrevocable life insurance trust, that multiples in millions of death benefit would be tax-free. None of his other investment holdings could come close to something like that when you compare the two. Now, would the return of investment, would that percentage, that rate, remember I mentioned earlier, it could be possibly illustrated at 6 to 9%. The real number there is probably closer to 6 to 8%. But the point is, even if he only made 4% on this, so you have the cash accumulation plus that multiples in death benefit, this is all tax-free. But something went haywire here along the way that we can't learn from because we don't know the facts. The facts I know that are public, that we just shared, are what they are. And with that limited list of facts, what we could suggest on knowing just that is really stepping into this with expectations being reasonable to guaranteed. We like when we can find the guarantees in something like this. Anything else is the icing on the cake. And the sad story to the whole Kyle Busch scenario and the multi-millions poured in and the multi-millions of settlement, I believe it was around $8.9 million in that settlement, is throughout all of this, what never happened was a life insurance policy was still in place, even though the settlement occurred through this carrier. Once the settlement occurred, all the contractual relationship ended. And here we are. Kyle Busch and his family is mourning his death. And there was no life insurance in place other than what he had in other situations, which again, we don't know the facts around. So how do we walk away from this and learn from it when it comes to a death benefit that went away, a settlement that came back to him in cash, and this big elephant, which I'm going to say in the room today, is that there wasn't any life insurance in place after this from that carrier. We'll presume there was some other policies in place. So if I was the advisor on this, what I would have advised is to get some form of an adjustment made, possibly in this agreement, where the $8.9 million in cash settlement would come back to the Bushes, but without having to go through any more underwriting. He would have been able to convert that death benefit with the same insurance company to a term life insurance policy, which is extremely low in premium, but at least there would have been a replacement life insurance amount in place as part of that agreement. Much more to say about this. And I know it's easy to be an armchair quarterback, but what we're trying to do today is use this as a learning instance, something to learn from, to gain some type of knowledge, and to protect ourselves against. The biggest part to this is, remember, life insurance isn't an investment. An investment isn't a life insurance policy. We can't drive a life insurance policy faster than it's really built to go, knowing what the expectations are before the disappointments set in and the misunderstandings come out. So that's it for today. I hope there's a learning lesson there. As always, have a prosperous day.
You've been listening to the Joe Simon Podcast. Big ideas with powerful stories and real-time solutions. Business succession planning, executive benefits, employee benefits, tax beneficial savings, and more. Remember, information discussed here today is dated and not specific to your situation. Always seek personal counsel from qualified advisors. Joe Simon is a licensed insurance agent in the state of Wisconsin. Licensed to advise on accident and health, life insurance, disability insurance and annuities, as well as qualified long-term care insurance.